Yes,
The
yes, yes, yes.
Tasty Trade platform shows both IVR and IVX on every chain, and I still don't know which one should drive my decision. IVR can be 60 with thin credits, and IVR can be 20 with huge premiums. Which one actually matters more when deciding if a trade is worth it?
Well, I think yes and yes. So I look at IVR, but that just tells you the IVR tells you if the implied volatility is high versus itself. But you also have to look at the implied volatility. So you might look at something bonds, for example. If you take a look at the notes, even if that IVR is high, you're going to look over there and it's still going to have a 675 implied volatility. So even if it's high for itself, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to want to trade it. Very good. So you see the IVR here is a 13.6, but the IVX is a 4, a 5. Those are still pretty low premiums. So I'm not selling premium. I mean, sometimes I will, but I'm usually not going to be, this isn't going to be my bread and butter premium sale from that perspective.
Right, and we were looking at that yesterday in Micron, for example, where you had seen IVRs come in, but when you go out along the curve, you can go out to 42, 56, 84. And a half percentile right now, but is it still worth trading? This was the rationale for Crude, in fact, yesterday. Jamal and I were talking about this. TP and I were talking about this too. When you go out along the curve, yes, IVR is only 20, but raw volatility at 50%, that is still worthwhile to engage in. So IVR doesn't tell the full story. It gives you a peek into whether or not something's worthwhile, perhaps.
Yeah, but so and I always say that you kind of got to need to know where the numbers come from. The numbers are great in theory, but they all have their time and their place. So that was a good example with crude oil.
We can go to the next question here, Laura.
Okay, the Tasty platform shows. Oh, there we go. When you are putting on a short-term trade, how much attention do you actually pay to gamma? Is there a specific level where you look at it and say this is too high for the risk that I want to take? Do you want me to take that?
No, because I'm really a short-term trader, right? I really, my best trades, and I've done this study for myself, and I think this is actually a useful exercise that traders should do, particularly newer traders. Go back in and specifically bucket out the type of strategies that you've used and the time frames, the durations that you've held them for, and see where you're successful. One of the things that I learned about myself over the years of trading, I did this back in the late 2010s. I broke down all of my trades that I'd done over like I think 5 or 6 year window, and saw like what strategy did I use, what was the intent of holding this, did I deviate from my plan, and it took a long time to go through this. But what I learned was that scalping for me, holding trades for less than 3 days, it was basically just giving the market money. And so I stopped doing it and my trading performance got better. So I found myself 3 weeks at least is kind of a floor for how long I like to hold my trades, where I'm most successful. And when I'm looking at it, like going into something at 50 days or 45 days in on an option, gamma isn't so much of a concern from the way that I operate.
Okay, I think that's a good exercise for people to go through and do that. That had to be a big task.
It is important. It wasn't important, but it's an important task, right? You have to figure out what type of trading style fits your personality. And I myself, I'm an emotional person, right? Not to be like the Italian American guy here, but like I'm an emotional person. I overreact to things. I'm very interested in the news and politics. And so I can get wrapped up in headlines that cross my screen. And so I have to remove myself from that, knowing that that's like a bias and a fault about how I operate. As much as I try to block it out, I can't. I've learned that about myself. So I have to take steps to prevent myself from making decisions based on that emotional short-term thinking.
Chris, I'm also very emotional, but I do not look at headlines. So I don't make sense and you don't make sense, but together we might make sense. In the fact that I'm a numbers person, so I do very short term. Sometimes I mean, I have always said you can give me no headlines, just give me an option chain, but I'm an old school trader, right? But what I was going to say about the gamma here is that I do a lot of short term trades, but I'm all over the place. Like I do everything under the sun. I scalp, I have long term, I have short term, I manage lots of different accounts. If you are worried about gamma, you might be too big. That's what I'm saying. This is one of those deltas where this is one of those things where on the floor it made a lot of sense because your positions were massive, right? But as a self-directed retail investor sitting on this side, I rarely worry about gamma. I kind of know what my positions are, what I want from them, what I want from each individual one, but I'm not looking at gamma.
There you go.
Yeah.
Laura, let's go to the next one. I want to sell covered calls, but I can't afford 100 shares of the stocks I actually want to trade. How do you set up a poor man's covered call, and what's a catch versus a regular covered call? Great question.
Okay, so now I'm biased on this. We talked about this yesterday. I personally think the best stock replacement in the world is a zero extrinsic back ratio because you are controlling 100 shares of a stock at a fraction of the price, and you can set that up into whatever cycle you want and sell a call against it. So that's just it. A zero extrinsic back ratio is selling a 50 delta call. I'm just using the bullish version. 50 delta call and buying 270 delta 70 delta calls. So this will allow you to have about 98 delta in the stock without paying any extrinsic value. That's your stock replacement. Then sell whatever call you would against your stock. That's what I would recommend doing.
So when you say zero extrinsic back ratio, that's a zebra.
Zebra. And it was named by one of our viewers, but it was something that Jenny and I invented a long time ago because we were sick of doing a poor man's covered call where, say you go out to January and you're buying something deep in the money, you're still giving up that extrinsic value and it's still pretty expensive. So we, as kind of active traders, will do that where you're using that stock replacement, selling a 50 delta and buying 270s. Gives you 100 shares and then sell whatever call you want to against it. That's my personal opinion on a poor man's covered call.
I don't do covered calls that much. Maybe that's because I just don't have that many shares of any individual stock in my personal portfolio. But there are ways, and this is when you get enough of the individual stock. I mean, let's say you were someone who owned Nvidia several years ago, and you got through the stock splits. You probably have, like, say you had 10 shares then, now you have over 100. You can operate and use your existing stock holdings to generate income from your portfolio, and that's what this question is getting at the end of the day.
Yes, correct. Covered calls have their time and their place. I mean, you'll notice I don't have a lot of them. I like you don't have a lot of them in my account, but I do have some.
Yeah, I don't have any of those positions on right now. Hey, Laura, we can keep this train moving. This train doesn't stop here. Last question coming up. The platform shows CVAR in every position, but I've never really used it in my decision making. How do you actually incorporate CVAR when sizing a trade or managing portfolio risk? This feels like I'm reading out of my CFA textbook right now.
It does. I feel terrible saying this out loud. I don't look at CVAR. I kind of know what. Can we show it on the platform? Do you know where to find it?
I don't. So because I don't use it.
If you, I believe so. It just they say it's your condition. The CVAR is your conditional value at risk, which is just a numeric version of what they think, give or take, what could possibly be your, I think probably maximum loss, not maximum loss, but a realistic approach. So say if you go to the trade page, you're on Amazon right now, if you don't mind, go to the trade page and just sell. Go to July, open July, and sell an at the money put, whatever, any put you want to, right? What the conditional value at risk, which isn't down here, but a lot of people do like to look at it, right? So here your buying power effect is $4,600. You know what you can make. So the conditional value at risk, in my opinion, and it is an actual number down there, it's going to differ a little bit from your buying power effect, but it's not too far off, and it's a realistic portrayal or numeric portrayal of what you actually could lose if it moves. I don't look at CVAR. I kind of look at, okay, what do when I'm looking at a position like this, I know selling a put is a bullish, neutral to bullish position, right? What would happen if the realistic portrayal, if Amazon goes down to 210, I'm going to lose, about $1,500 there. I just kind of look at it and be like, am I comfortable with that? Am I comfortable with even taking the stock or rolling this position with my buying power effect? I don't look at the conditional value at risk.
So conceptually here, VAR, value at risk, is measuring how much you can lose up to a certain point. CVAR is effectively measuring the worst case scenario that maybe VAR models fall short of capturing. The CFA Institute puts out these quarterly financial journals, so having read a little bit about this, one of the issues that institutions and fund managers have when using CVAR is that because it focuses on really like the worst case scenario, it leads to more conservative risk management. So it is a useful tool, but when applied, it can change your decision making. So the point I'm getting at, though, is don't put all of your money in that basket that CVAR is the end all be all. It does skew the way that you view risk in your portfolio. It will make you more of a conservative trader. And if you're okay with that, just understand that's typically the drift that it pushes decision making in.
I could see that. I could see that. Now, let me ask you this, Chris, because you do look at a lot of numbers. Do you think that sometimes it's too much? Do you think it's sometimes too much information? Because I appreciate what you're saying that if you see this, it does probably push you to be a little bit more conservative. It's kind of like when you read an aspirin bottle. Now we are an Advil bottle or a Tylenol bottle. When if you there you go. Well played. But if you're new or if it's the first time you're ever taking it, you read the back of that and you're like, I don't know if I want to take this. Now, we all know, so you and I both know that it's very safe and very effective, and obviously you've been taking some today. But but so it's kind of like that. Sometimes too much information can be bad information, I think.
Absolutely. Paralysis by analysis. And that's exactly like that goes back to the whole scalping thing. I'm getting waterboarded with information all day long. I keep open, a stream of the Bloomberg terminal here.
Yeah.
This headline, that headline, this headline. What do you do? So much paralysis by analysis. So you got to remove yourself from some of those things. Don't get overwhelmed by the numbers. Start with building a system that works for you and then figure out ways to improve upon it. And if using something like VAR or CVAR helps you make better informed decisions, then utilize it. And if it doesn't, then don't. But absolutely, don't take our words for it. Experiment the whole thing. Invest and investigate. You can't really figure this stuff out until you start actually putting some real money behind it on your own. The theory helps, but you got to put it into practice.
Absolutely. Okay, Chris, can I answer one question that we got from the chat?
Yeah, go for it.
A little while ago. So can you go to SpaceX options real quick? So I was on with Mike and Jamal. I'm usually on in the opens, and I was talking to them about how SpaceX. My plan was, I know everybody's going a little bit farther out in time. We were talking about how I'm a nearer term trader. I sold. It was the 2-day option at the time, which is now the 0-day. I sold the 55 call in SpaceX. Which is now the 0-day, and people asked what I'm doing with it. I'm sorry, put, not call, put. I'm going to try to build up my SpaceX position. So I wound up buying this back today and rolled it out. So my goal ultimately, and this is working out perfectly, is to try. I was getting $5 in premium for it, so I bought it back and I actually rolled it out another 2 days. I'm now in the 6-day 55. So it's just going to be a very simple. I'm an active trader, so I don't mind. I want to try to get $5, which is a lot actually, every couple days. So I know it's $7,000 in buying power, but that's my ultimate goal. I want this to be a very tight wheel of fortune. Have you ever heard that strategy before? Wheel of fortune strategy.
And listen, I love Pat Sajak and Vanna White, but no, that is not a. We're a wheelhouse, to be clear.
Oh yes, okay, we are wheelhouse. So the tight wheel strategy is selling aggressive at the money puts until you get put the stock. I'm a roller, but until I get put the stock, then sell aggressive calls until it gets called away, and so on and so forth. So I'm trying to use this, this very juicy at the money premium to say I want $5, $5, $5, $5 every couple days. And I'm going to keep kind of moving my strike around there until I get put the stock, because we talked about that IVX right now. It's 76. That might not be there forever, right? So, but right now it is. And it's still because it's new and it's fresh and there's still lots of premium in those front months, and it hasn't really moved too much. So that's what I did. I rolled from which was the 2-day when I put it on, to now into the 6-day.
So a question that I saw the other day in the chat, which it wasn't here now, but it's a great time to ask it. When you see 30 IVR in SpaceX versus the IVX here at 77, do you trust the IVR because it's such a new product?
No. Yeah, this is one where I was talking about this with TP. I was surprised they actually put the IVR up there, because it really truly, it's saying it's, the IVR usually goes back in time and gives you where it's been versus itself. What is this? 10 days old?
10 days, yes, they take 10. The 12th, yeah.
It's 10 days old. So it's pretty funny when you look at this. I do not trust that IVR. And I also want to say too, sometimes you can see a big skew in it, right? So you'll see an IVR that'll be kind of lower. If you've seen an inflated volatility for some spike or some weird random thing, you'll see that IVR is low, even though it's kind of normal for itself. So you need to kind of understand what the numbers mean in order to kind of translate them a little bit. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that's why you can't look at any of these things without context. You really do need to understand what you're getting into here, but don't be overwhelmed by it. There are certain things that, we talked about the other day. You know the rules, and then you know how to work around them. And that's a function of feel and experience and building up that library in your head of all the trades that you've tried to take, didn't work, worked, made money on, lost money on, maybe even blew up on. But you have to learn those things, just by engaging in the market.
Just by engaging in the market. I like it. Go ahead.
I interestingly enough, I got a text. This isn't going to be from one of the questions in the chat, but I got a text from a reporter today asking if I could talk about gold at $4,000 an ounce. I know that you were selling some puts down here. I've been leaning shorts. We're getting a little bit of a counter trend bounce that's working against me, but you sold some puts down here. How are you managing this position now going into the weekend?
So gold is it's interesting too with gold, because I'm like I said, I have larger accounts, but gold is something that I'm slow and steady wins the race. I'm a perma metal bull. So gold and silver, I look at it when it gaps down like this, I look at this as a little bit of a buying opportunity to collect a little bit more. So I sold put spreads in and I can actually look exactly what I have. I'm not closing these yet. I went to the GC contract. I'm all over the board. There's not one that I like, but I did trade the GC contract more because it was pre-market. So I didn't go to GLD and I wanted in on the downside of the gold move. And I have the 3,800, 3780 put spread. So I probably should close it. I'm up about 40% on that position, but because I am looking at it as more of a permanent kind of filtering into gold, I'm probably going to close it. I might roll it up a little bit and take in more premium.
Yeah, so GC, I mean, GC is a big product, right? The overnight buying requirement for GC, I think, is north of $25,000, but MGC is out there and 1OZ is out there. 1OZ is a hundredth the size of GC, 1 point multiplier. So every dollar that gold goes up or down, 1OZ goes up by a dollar or so.
What was that? 1OZ?
1OZ, it's their new product.
Can we take a look at it?
Yeah, teeny tiny.
So this is something you can probably scalp. No, but like I said, I'm an old school trader where I like to use the options premium to give myself room to be wrong with this. But this is probably a scalpable product if it's teeny tiny.
This is, and I love using this as opposed to GLD because I can just go in and buy gold and it's liquid, it's deep. There aren't options, which is unfortunate, but it's a wonderful product. Like I much prefer trading this than MGC. And you can obviously define $250 of overnight buying power per contract.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah,
that is wonderful.
It's a really good product. It's a new product. You're seeing that you're getting, I mean, they just did SIC as well. There's a silver 1 ounce contract, which I suppose in hindsight, Liz, I remember in December 2017 when the CME listed futures for Bitcoin and that marked the top. Do you know when CME listed the silver 100 ounce contracts?
No.
In January. Right at the top.